Hello students, in BC 2010 you're going to begin telling the story of why the patient is receiving services. The diagnosis is going to establish medical necessity for the visit. This is going to play a role in the provider being paid by the insurance company for that service. Now you know from your previous classes that financial stability of the organization is tied to correct coding. I want to take just a few minutes to introduce you to your Icd Manual. Icd stands for International Classification of Diseases. The 10 means that it is the 10th revision. The book began way back in 1966, so this is the 10th revision of the Icd Manual. And the CM stands for Clinical Modification. Icd is published by the World Health Organization, and you may have seen that abbreviated as WHO, the World Health Organization. And then it's modified for use here in the United States. Clinical modification takes a while to complete. We are one of the last industrialized countries to begin using Icd-10. We were supposed to start using this back in October 1st of 2013, and then President Obama pushed it back a year, and then it was to begin on October 1st, 2014. And then there was an act of Congress that pushed it back again until October 1st, 2015. Now, we've been using this version 10, since October the 1st, 2015. There's a lot of information in your coding manual, and I want you to know that tabbing is not optional. It is essential. Make sure you tab your manual so that you can find that information quickly. Your manual starts with the guidelines, so you're going to want to start by adding a tab at the beginning of your guidelines. Now this is where you're going to find the rules, what all those symbols mean, and how to make sure you're arriving at the correct code, and how you're sequencing things correctly. So the guidelines are really important, and you want to make sure you have a tab there. And you can even get more specific as time goes on in those chapter-specific guidelines. For example, you can see here in my HIV guidelines, I have tabbed HIV. So if I have a question on HIV, I can come to these chapter-specific guidelines pretty quickly. And then I even came out and wrote some things so I could find stuff even faster. For example, here you see the selection and sequencing of an HIV code when there's an HIV-related condition such as Kaposi's sarcoma, because that's a frequently used HIV condition. So you're going to want to code first the B20, and then following that you're going to code any of the conditions like the Kaposi's sarcoma or whatever the scenario is. But I wanted to be able to come here quickly and find out. For example, with this coding guideline, it says that the patient with HIV disease admitted for an unrelated condition. I'm going to code that unrelated condition first, and then I'm going to code B20 second. So I don't have to do a lot of reading if I go ahead and prepare my book. And like I said, this is stuff that can happen as you're working through it. You don't have to sit down and try to do it all at once. There are 4 sections in the guidelines, and you may want to go ahead and tab those as well. Section 1 is going to give you the conventions, the general coding guidelines, and these chapter-specific guidelines. In Section 2, you're going to be seeing inpatient coding and guidelines for the selection of the principal diagnosis. Section 3 gives you the guidance for reporting other diagnoses, such as other conditions that the patient has that's affecting the patient care. And then Section 4 is diagnostic coding and reporting guidelines for outpatient services. You also see Appendix I, which is your present on admission guidelines used for inpatient coding. So you may have noticed that these guidelines cover both inpatient and outpatient services. And the guidelines differ based on whether the patient is considered to be an inpatient or an outpatient. So watch for those terms when you're doing your coding scenarios to make sure you're using the correct guideline. After your guidelines, you're going to see anatomy illustrations. So you're going to want to put a tab there that's going to direct you to anatomy. So Part 1 is your official guidelines for coding and reporting, and then Part 2 is your Alphabetic Index. Let's take a closer look at your Alphabetic Index. The Alphabetic Index is a listing of all diseases and injuries. You're going to notice that the main terms are in bold and also in red in your Alphabetic Index. Also notice there are 3 columns. So when you're finished looking through this column, the first column, you're going to come back up and look through your second column, and then come back up and look through your third column, and then on to the next page if you're searching for a main term. Because the main terms are bold-faced and are in red. Under each main term, you're going to see a listing of subterms. So they're indented under that main term, and then you have a listing of subterms. And then you also have a listing of even more subterms under a few of those other subterms. So you can get very specific in ICD coding. Let's look at an example. Let's say that we're coding for an abnormal elevated blood pressure reading. So the patient's seeing the physician, and this is the first time they've noticed that the patient's blood pressure is elevated. So they have an abnormal elevated blood pressure reading. Now the doctor isn't saying that the patient has hypertension. He's just saying at this time there is an abnormal elevated blood pressure reading. So what is your main term in that scenario? Abnormal elevated blood pressure reading. If you said abnormal, you are correct. So here we see the beginning of abnormal in our main term. And then it also goes on up here into abnormal. So what's our subterm for that? Blood pressure. You're right. So we're going to start looking, and it's in alphabetical order here for the subterms, and we're going to be looking for blood pressure. So there I find blood pressure. What else does my scenario tell me for abnormal elevated blood pressure? We look down here at these subterms and we see elevated, and it's sending us to R03.0. So I'm going to flip back to the tabular, because remember we never pick the code strictly from finding it in the alphabetic, because there's going to be more information about that in the tabular that's either going to tell us that we need to add more digits or give us some more specific information. So we never want to code directly from the alpha index. So you could leave your finger right here in case you need to flip back. You could put a piece of paper right here in case you need to come back, because sometimes we do get back there and read it and say, oh, there must be another subterm I'm missing because this doesn't tell everything I need to know. So let's look in the tabular at R03.0. Now, if you get there, if I get there quicker than you, you can pause this video until you get there. That's the beauty of having a video. You can fast forward it, you can rewind it and listen to it again, but you want to go into your tabular at R03.0. So now that you've found R03.0 in your tabular index, let's see if there are any additional characters and verify that the diagnosis meets our coding scenario in our documentation. Sometimes you have to have another code in order to meet the entire scenario. But R03 is the category for these codes, and we see a circle here at R03, so we know because of that circle, which means if you look at the bottom of your page that you need to use additional characters. So the additional characters are listed here under the category. So it's either going to be R03.0 or R03.1 for the R03 category. So R03.0, which is what we came back here to look at, says elevated blood pressure reading without a diagnosis of hypertension. And then it gives us a little note and tells us what this category is to be used for. And we also have a note right above there telling us when and how to assign this code from this category. So you see there are a lot of information once you get back here. This is where you're going to find your excludes notes for diagnoses that are going to be excluded from that. But for R03.0, we don't have any excludes notes. And R03.0 fits our coding scenario. So we're going to code that for R03.0. Now there's 21 chapters in your tabular section. So you're going to want to put a tab at each of those chapters so you can get to those chapters really quickly. And here's a nice video. It's a YouTube video that gives you information on how to do that. After your alphabetic index, you're going to see a neoplasm table. Now, a neoplasm is an abnormal growth of tissue that's caused by the rapid division of cells that have undergone some form of mutation. A neoplasm can be benign, which is non-cancerous. It can be malignant, which is cancerous. It could be a primary malignancy, a secondary malignancy. It could be in situ, or uncertain behavior, or unspecified behavior. Once you find your main term when you're coding in the neoplasm table, you will notice that you have different categories to pick from. So your main term could be primary, it could be secondary, it could be in situ, benign, uncertain behavior, or unspecified behavior. And you'll just have to pay attention to your coding scenario or your diagnosis in order to pick that. But again, this is just like we did in the alphabetic. You have main terms and then subterms underneath those. And then it's in alphabetical order as well. If you want a step-by-step on how to code in the neoplasm table, you can watch this video on the screen. You'll just have to copy and paste it or write it down and put it into your browser. Make sure that you verify the code that you get here in this alphabetic index in the neoplasm table back in your tabular list as well, because remember we never code directly from the alpha. And then make sure you put a tab here at the neoplasm table for quick reference. Next, you will find your table of drugs and chemicals. Now, this table is used to identify drugs or chemicals in your coding scenario. There are many columns in the drug and chemicals table, so you want to make sure once you find the drug that you're looking for here that you scroll over and you pick the appropriate column depending on what your coding scenario is. There's a YouTube video that gives you step-by-step instructions on how to code from this section. So you want to make sure that you watch that video to help you. And again, make sure you verify the code that you find here in the tabular before choosing that code, because you're going to have a 7th character extension for these. A for initial encounter, for example, that's going to be listed last. And you're going to have to find that in your tabular list. So also make sure you tab your table of drugs and chemicals. I know that's a lot to write on a tab, so you might just want to put TOD for table of drugs and chemicals. The next tab you're going to want to do is your external cause of injuries index. Now this is another alphabetic index, but here's where you're going to find codes that identify how the accident happened and where the accident happened. So this is it's important to know that this alpha index is here because you could look all day long in that first alpha index and never find what you're looking for when you're looking for how and where an accident happened. You can find the type of accident and the activity in this section. So make sure you put a little tab for your external causes to get to that really quickly. It's important for you to know that here at UMA, help is just a phone call or a click away. Please call me or text me at 681-404-0858 with any questions that you might have. I'm available 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please don't get frustrated and just close your book. Give me a phone call or a text, or you can even send me a course mail message. There are recorded instructional sessions there in your Student Success Center. You can find that at the top of your classroom by clicking Student Success Center and then Academic Coaching. And you can see these recorded instructional sessions. You can also see the calendar for when they're doing group sessions if you want to join a group session. And you can also get help with your coursework 7 days a week from the academic coaches, and you can reach them at 888-215-8215, or you can email them. Just click on your Student Success Center and then Academic Coaches, and you'll see everything you need right there. But I really want to help you, so give me a call. Thank you. Bye.